to, I think, twice before. Is that right, Charlie? I think we've spoken to you twice.
Yeah, I think it was something like that.
Yeah, and it's been a little while since we've had you on, but it's great to have you back. We always enjoy your geological insights into what we talk about. And today we've got a bit of a special on different deposits, haven't we? And I've written them down, and we've got orogenic, porphyry and epithermal, and VMS, also known as volcanic massive sulfide. And from what from my experience in exploration, anyone who invests in exploration has probably heard of these sort of deposits, but don't really have any idea what they are. So I think that's what the point of today's podcast is, for you to enlighten both myself and Kenny and our listeners. So yeah, good to have you back. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And Kenny, how are you?
Yep, good to have you back on, Charlie. Yeah, it's just a bit dark, cold, wet, and miserable up in Scotland, which is just like every other day here. So, but no, we're just cracking on. But no, I'm interested to hear what you've got to say, Charlie, because even though I'm quite a nosy git, and I love digging into historical reports, there's a lot of the terms that I just don't understand. So it's probably, although it's our podcast show, we're probably going to sit and listen to you for the next hour. So and we'll try and any questions we'll try and interrupt you and see how it goes from there. So yeah, it should be interesting, and I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot. So really, it's the show is yours tonight, Charlie. So it is. So I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks, chaps, for having me on. And like I said, I was just going to cover the basics of 4 of the more common gold forming systems. And like you said, as orogenic, which quite actually basically means mountain forming. So within that, there's actually a number of breakdowns within this that people can they'll hear these words and they've read it in an RNS, but what does that actually mean? So things like mesothermal, epizonal, or greenstone belts, they're all actually with underneath this kind of orogenic kind of halo. And they're generally the deepest in the Earth's crust. The next one I'm going to cover is actually porphyries and epithermals. Now, the reason why I've put these two together is actually because they form the same geological setting, but actually form quite different ore bodies, different grades and different kind of structures that as an investor, you should be having a little nosy and understand exactly why they're bringing up these terms and what you can expect from results from these kind of projects. And the next one is volcanic massive sulfides, which actually form at the Earth's surface. They're one of the few types of ore bodies that do that. And they actually form at deep sea vents, black smokers, which probably people have watched David Attenborough's amazing documentary showing them. Well, once upon a time, what we are currently mining at the surface was once at the bottom of the seas. So it's quite incredible to have a look at them. So I'll start off with orogenic, and as we were just chatting to Mark and Kenny just before this, we started chatting. There's actually quite a lot of the projects we cover seem to be within this category, aren't they?
It seemed to be, yeah. Yeah, you struggled to find some in the other categories.
Yeah, so the ones we've got in here already are Power and Red Rocks. Was it Red Rock Australasia JV down in the Victoria Goldfields? There's more of an epizonal ore body down there. Then we have ECR as well down there. Cobra Resources, again an Australian project down in Victoria. No, they're not Victoria. Sorry, they're over in South Australia, and then
Woodina.
over. Sorry,
that's the Woodina project.
Oh yes, the Woodina.
Yeah, they're actually drilling that now, aren't they?
Yes, they are drilling them. And what classifies these orogenic ore bodies is they have a very large fault which goes into the crust, and that's where the mineralization is following. So it's not necessarily always on that major structure, but that structure is creating the pathway for fluids at depth to come to surface. And then that's basically the overall kind of understanding of what an orogenic system is. And as a result, they actually make some of the world's biggest gold deposits, both in size, grade, length. They're pretty immense. And so I think you can look at some of these deposits, and there's one in Ghana, there's over 30 million ounces. You get the ones over in Canada. So looking at another example of an orogenic one would be gold, Pure Gold's asset over in Ontario, and the Great Bear's asset, and that actually leads us on to Panther Metals' Canadian asset. And actually, what you're looking for with these projects is long extensions of breaks in the rock. And that's why when people are looking for orogenic, they're cracking out the geophysics, because they want to find these major fault structures. And on those major fault structures, you can then do your soil sampling, you can do your grab sampling, and that's when you start looking for those colors, which Darren's been so good at putting out on Twitter for Panther Metals, showing people actually this system has got something exciting popping up in it.
So, but these deposits are going to be presumably over a huge area.
Oh yes.
Yeah, because a plate is tectonic plates are huge. So yeah, so over a huge area. How do you know that? So, I mean, we know where the plates are, don't we? From just history. Is that right? Yeah, so we know roughly where they are. And then, so when you're chipping stuff out, how do you know when you sort of hit it, found it, so to speak? You just look for the banding in the rock. Is that it?
Well, within that zone, there'll be a huge amount of what's referred to as breccia, another term I'm sure you might have noticed. And that's where two rock surfaces collide, and they basically create a fracture zone. There's just a broken material as it's rubbing up against each other. Now, that's generally in what's called the brittle part of the formation. But actually lower down, you then have ductile deformation, and that's where you get more shear breaking. And shearing is something, again, people might have read, which is, just think of a bit more like plastic ripping apart. It kind of, it stretches and then breaks. And in doing so, it creates these kind of long wiggles, which, again, another term is en echelon faulting or fractures. And going back to your questions, what are you looking for? What you're really looking for, generally, let's take Panther Metals, because they're right at this beginning stages of exploration here. They've taken a regional geophysical map. They've seen what greenstone belts within them. Now, greenstone belts are actually deep sea rock that has been faulted and brought to the surface. And that's part of this major fault change, is a change in lithological rocks type. And when oceanic rock is brought to the surface, generally it breaks down into a number of different minerals which are actually green, hence its name, greenstone.
Okay.
So this change in lithologies you can see through, let's take magnetic survey. You'll see a distinct change between the two. Now, you have to go along with your GPS and work out where that is. So maybe there's a lot of grass cover over there, so you take your soil sample, you do some soil sampling across, or you go along and you look for outcrops. And if you see on these outcrops, you'll be identifying on both sides in the greenstone and in whatever formations on the other side, you'll see normal rocks. And as you get closer to the mineralizing fault, you'll then be looking for alteration textures. And in the geochemistry, trace element geochemistry, such as arsenic. And that's telling you that there's something coming up through that rock, creating the gold setting. So I think that sort of answers your question. I think I've gone a bit rambling on that one.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
then
along
the next thing,
the fault line, like you say, and it's you said, as you said earlier, it's like that's what's guiding the deposit because there is effectively a fault line there.
yes.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. Going back to my A-level geography, whether it doesn't matter whether the plates are converging, diverging. It's still or does it? Does that make a difference?
It's going to be during a collisional setting.
Right. Okay.
That's when these systems form, because it's creating the pressure and temperature environments for these systems, really.
Okay.
And generally, then what you're looking for is then within these major faults, because not all of these faults. So though I said that they're quite extensive, the length of these faults, it won't actually be mineralized the whole way along it. With economic gold grades, let's say, you'll actually need to look for kinks or splay faults within that major structure area. And from there, you then can identify the gold. And to take a good example of this, I'd probably take Iron Ridge, actually. They've got a large granite body to the southwest of their Zaranu project. I think it's called the Yakasira granite. And that's actually created between along these fault structures. Generally in geology, there's no point making a new pathway. You follow the same pathway. So often faults, intrusions, everything will be occurring along the same fault fracture. It's not going to create a new fracture for a new event. So you get quite complex and concentrated in these systems. So here we've got a granite intrusion along this major fault structure. And actually it's right in this corner bit of the fault structure where this historic drilling of iron ridges they've just found, that's been they found, if you look at the historic grades that they came up with, were spectacular. And that's because though this whole fault structure is allowing fluids to come up to the surface, they're looking for the area of least pressure to fill. And if they've got a nice big granite body creating this kind of open spaces, well, that's where the gold's going to try and go. So the next thing you're looking for are these either splay structures or kinks within the faults that then concentrate these major forming.
And when you say like a kink, is it like where the fault if you look at the line rather than it being a nice curve, it's sort of you can see a point or a kink or a strike swing. I mean, I was just thinking of Conroy Gold. When, they talk about part of their deposit. Is it the Sleeve Glar one where the fault goes and they say undergoes a significant strike swing? Is that what you're talking about when you sort of say kinks?
It probably is. I haven't looked at Conroy in particular, but yes, I think that would be it. These faults, though, from a macro point of view, let's take a regional scale geophysical survey, and you look at this map, and you can see this quite nice looking fault, and it looks like a straight line. And actually, the more you zoom into it, the more complex it gets, and the more you realize it's not a simple line in there, and it's actually made up of multiple lines that don't necessarily interconnect. They're creating these kind of interconnecting major faults, which on a macro scale look major, and on a micro structure there's multiple of them, and then even within there, they're then looking to create in fold structures and stuff. Actually, talking particularly about fold structures, I think we can bring in Javier on deposit, because everyone loves talking about that one from Greatland Gold. Well, that's a similar style structure here, where you've got a fold. Now, as the fold has been created, right at the hinge point, You can actually do it with your hands. If you put one hand in front of the other and then curve the knuckles, like turning the center hand into a fist, you'll realize that it's actually opening up spaces on the top between the two hands. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or folding a book. You'll notice when you fold a book kind of around to make a fold structure, you'll see that holes open up within the pages right on the axis of the book. And that again is the same thing that's happened with Greatland Gold. There's fluid passing up through that system, and it's looking for those open spaces for it to flush full with all this fluid.
Right. Yeah, and it goes there because it's easy for it to flow to, and it's sort of like a low pressure area.
Exactly that. It's all about pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. So the orogenic deposits are probably the most common around the world then, Charlie?
Well, they are very geographically restricted. So you've got to look for these generally they've been quite ancient crusts. And they also need to be, because these would have formed quite deep down in the Earth's crust. We were talking about the transition zone from ductile material into brittle material. So you need sufficient pressure and temperature to create these variations in the rock. And then again, within there, different rock types behave differently at different temperatures and pressures, and that variation allows for these different faulting looking structures. So we're talking about something that's very deep, that's been lifted right up to the surface and weathered all the way down to expose this rock. So generally very old, and it's been lifted up and weathered and eroded away.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good starting point in orogenic deposits. So what's the next one we're going to talk about?
The next one is porphyry and epithermal. So we're coming up through the system now, and these two are both associated together. It's when a felsic lava, generally at, again, a destructive plate margin, where you have one plate being destroyed, generally underneath another crust. And in doing so, volatile materials come off from that bottom plate and create this a particular kind of fluid, within the magma, which is less dense than the surrounding magma and crust, and starts to push its way up to the surface. And now, as it pushes its way up to the surface, just like I'm trying to say it like a balloon in water. Let's think of it. As it comes up to the surface, the pressure and temperature, the pressure in particular, starts to decrease, and water comes out of the magma and builds up at the top of these systems until eventually the pressure builds up so much that it actually erupts and creates it creates a porphyry. And these fluids, they contain different types of chemical complexes which hold the golds and your coppers in there, and that gets splurted up into the surrounding rock. And these things, again, are huge. So this is specifically for porphyries, and they create this big blob of copper and gold in the surrounding rock. And that's why you then we're looking down particularly in Chile and or at least South America, like with Sol Gold, where you have these massive areas of low-grade gold and copper, but there's so much of it that you can then put in scales of economy, and it could be mineable. So that's what Sol Gold in particular at the moment, everyone's been watching for the last couple of years as they progress. That's what's so exciting about these things.
Why does it tend to be more low grade?
It's just because it's not as concentrated.
Yeah.
The previous fluids that erupt from these, so there's multiple events, and in the first event you get predominantly more acidy fluids, which break down the surrounding rock and create this zone in which the next set of fluids, the mineralizing fluids, can then flow into. Right.
And I think from memory, when we spoke to David Price, he said, some of the actual rocks were spectacular from porphyry deposits. They just that was his favourite type of rock. So it was just because of the composition of the rock. Because as you said, the pressure and the temperature just creates these amazing bits of rock.
Mm. And they create. If you just Google kind of a schematic of porphyry, you can see it creates these multiple layers of alteration, and then there's one zone, the kind of near the center of these porphyritic systems, which hosts the mineralization. And so you can go across, and it's something that South Americans are kind of renowned for, is using satellites as an exploration tool, where they have literally scoured the Andes for these porphyritic systems by looking for alteration textures, and they create a lovely big bullseye when you're lucky enough to find one of these things, and it's a fantastic exploration tool for these explorers. But yes, so that's a porphyry.
Well, you said it was like an electromagnetic survey.
No, if you do just a satellite survey.
Oh,
so,
a satellite survey, right.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, no, so if just taking different, like Landsat, and from that you can then change, you can look at different wavelengths associated with coming off the ground. And people have worked out different combinations of these wavelengths
right.
To actually indicate certain clay minerals. Different alteration halos, even then could be associated with water, vegetation, and the like there.
And what is Landsat? Because I've heard that term before, but that is actually satellites in space.
Yes, that's a particular satellite
specifically put space. There for geological purposes.
For multiple purposes.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just taking surveys all around the world of the Earth across the whole spectrum of light, and from that you can then manipulate that to what we can see. Because of course, if the wavelengths get too large or too fine, I'm sure there's some geophysicists shouting at me now that. We can't see, but using Landsat, we're able to manipulate that and turn it into a visual aspect that we, through our very limited light spectrum, can actually visualize.
Sure.
And so it's a fantastic bit of technology, but it requires some open ground, because as soon as you have forests in there, or post mineralizing sediments, that covers it up. And it was a particular issue. We tried it out in Cyprus. So this is for Chesterfield, where we covered the ground over there. And it certainly worked very well for identifying certain aspects of the geology. How well it identified the mineral deposits, I think, was a bit more questionable. But found a lot of chicken farms. That's can say a lot of chicken farms were found because they create lovely clay zones, which came off and we got mixed up with. Anyway, yes. So that's Landsat. And then moving off from a porphyry, so the same systems, if they mix with water from the meteoric water rather than the magmatic water, you can then evolve into epithermal systems. Now, epithermal, you've got high sulfide and low sulfide, but for the general purpose of what we're talking about, let's just call it epithermal. And these generally form now in veins, and they're a little bit smaller than orogenic systems, but they form along similar lines. They're looking for a large fault or structure in which the minerals can go in and fill up. And within there, especially with low sulfide epithermal systems, again, there's a pressure point. Within that pressure point, you can then get boiling occurring. And this boiling allows the gold, the copper, there's lead, zinc, all to come out of solution at certain heights or pressure. Let's call it pressures within the system. And these are the sort of textures that when you're going along epithermal systems, you're trying to look for. And a perfect example of this would probably be the Red Rabbit project of Ariana that, again, I was lucky enough to work on as a student, because there in particular, where we could see epithermal systems bubbling away at the surface, and they're hot springs.
Okay.
So when you see a hot spring in some of these environments, they're actually the very end point of an epithermal system. And so down at depth, you'll actually have gold deposits. The gold deposits in the next 1,000 years that could potentially be mined are being formed down there. And we're just seeing these kind of hot springs with this kind of silica-looking material forming at the surface, sinters. And that was forming down in the valleys. But where we were, up a bit further up the hill, we actually had the boiling zone that we were looking at, and these have particular alteration textures. And these ones you do generally have things like breccia textures in there. You have banding colorations, colorformal banding, and yes, so these are generally high grade, relatively narrow veins, which are not that extensive, but they're very good high grade deposits, generally speaking. And again, actually, you have some in Japan, which are very high grade, and actually still they're still steaming because they're almost still trying to form whilst the miners are mining away.
Whilst the mining,
yeah, it's quite an interesting situation for those ones to be in. But so you can see actually from the same system, porphyries and epithermals, two very different types of systems. And one thing again think about here is if someone's talking about porphyry, well, you're now considering something that's very low grade and very extensive. So you're going to be thinking, JV takeover partners, as Sol Gold have done. Whereas on the other hand, if you've got an epithermal system, generally speaking, these things are very high grade, narrow vein, and actually that therefore gives you this beautiful opportunity to, as an explorer, develop into a junior miner by relatively low capital requirements to get in and start mining, just like Ariana did. Okay, they did it with a JV partner, but still, they wanted to keep to their roots of exploration, and they brought in someone who did want to do the mining. But still, it shows that these things can be done, and when they should be done, I think, is the important bit there. So that's an interesting one.
So is it easier to mine them than these epithermal ones as opposed to a porphyry?
Well, more realistic.
Okay.
I'm speaking in very general terms here, but if a junior explorer comes along and identifies a porphyry, it's going to take millions of dollars to just prove out a resource to start off with.
Right.
And then from that, you're then going to have to mine it using multi-millions of dollars to get that economies of scale. So the capital requirements, that hurdle rate to get into production, is a lot higher than if you have a narrow, high-grade vein.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Which suddenly you're not moving as much material. You don't have to drill as much to prove out the resource. And therefore, it's more realistic that a junior can evolve into it. It's not to say that you couldn't do it either way. People have, and I'm sure will do, JVs and epithermals, and they'll take on porphyries on their own. But these are the questions that I'm kind of trying to develop into what I would be looking at if someone brings one of these projects to me. And the last one, actually, volcanic massive sulfides. Now, though these have been mined for hundreds of years, they only really became particularly interesting kind of during the Great Wars of the World War II over in Canada, when securing resources was critical.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, these deposits, VMS, volcanic massive sulfides, are relatively small, modest-sized deposits, but extremely high grade and polymetallic. So we're talking about not just gold in here, but we're talking lead, zinc, coppers, silvers. It's got a whole array within this. And so that's where they became quite famous. And actually, they form in very similar environments to orogenic, ironically, being with these collision zones. Many of these VMSs form also on these collision zones, usually actually more in extensional settings. But similar thing, but a very different thing happens here. What happens is, again, magmatic body comes near the surface, ocean fluids circulate down, interacting with that magmatic body, and in doing so, the metals are kind of ripped out of it and brought up along, again, a fracture zone in which, as they reach the surface, this high temperature water interacts with the freezing cold ocean water at depths where the pressure is correct for such an environment. And as a result, these materials just come out of solution and are just dumped there. And they create these kind of, for a very usual style, I'll say usual, for an imaginative style, I always think of them as a bit like, I'm trying to think of something that's, usually think of them as a bit of a spot. They come up to the surface and they just form there. And they build out and all this gunk and stuff. I think that's a disgusting way of putting it, but maybe it gets the idea out that it's coming up into the surface. But they're relatively small, high grade. And so Chesterfield Resources, they're at the moment exploring for VMSs in Cyprus. And I had the privilege to go and work with those chaps. And that's what they're looking for, are these small VMSs. But one on its own is never going to be really. There's a couple of examples out there of single VMS which have made companies billions of dollars. But a single VMS isn't really going to shake the world much. What actually happens along these VMSs is they create multiple of them within a region, within a camp. And so where you find one, you often find multiple. And I use Chesterfield as one good example because they have the Limney pit, or a Limney mine, which was a large VMS deposit for Cyprus. And then close by, they then had other deposits like Canusa, Uncle Charles, Evlemeni, and there's another one called Double Seven. And though these are smaller ones surrounding a larger deposit, they're showing the same sort of characteristics. There was a hot magmatic body underneath these VMSs at one point, which was creating that heat to circulate along fractures, and these fractures then allowed concentration of materials at surface to create a VMS.
And is it always under the sea?
Within the sea, yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So the guys that are exploring in Cyprus are exploring in the ocean.
No, sorry, it's been brought to the surface.
Oh, so it's basically forming a land mass under the sea, and over many years it comes to the surface. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So in Cyprus's case, you have a multiple of events, and the major one is being Africa and Europe closing in on each other, and there's a major fault zone that's allowed Cyprus to kind of basically folded like books that have fallen over on your shelf, It slid up and it's just poking out really. So that's what Cyprus.
Okay.
It's just an extension of to the north. You've got all the Turkish faults, and I guess even Ariana's Red Rabbit projects over there as well. They're all associated with these same sorts of structures. And actually, that's something maybe to note as well, is though I'm putting them into categories, they do really overlap quite often. Another example, we were just chatting about this one, is Empire Mining's old asset in Georgia. For years, it was known as a VMS camp. So there's the what is it called? So there's a major mine over by Bolnisi. Begins with an M. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's a very large copper gold project, and it has always been said that it was a volcanic massive sulfide system. But then when Georgia Mining, now Empire Mining, came along and drilled holes into the Bolnisi project just to the east of there, they identified actually as a pipe structure, and they gave it a very VMS-esque looking style, but actually it was still associated with a pipe, and the characteristics of this sort of system, being at depth and the like, was actually of an epithermal system. So it was this hybrid of an epithermal system that was in the same environment and not quite to the surface of a VMS. So they can all overlap basically.
Even though they're called volcanic massive sulfides, will they look like a volcano on the surface, or not necessarily?
Yeah, I guess that's a bit of a bit of a confusing name for them. So the reason why they're kind of considered volcanic massive sulfides is more in the way that when a volcano erupts, it creates layers and layers and layers. When the VMS erupts, let's say, it does the same thing.
Yeah,
but
okay.
actually, it also does something a little bit more interesting or strange. Is as that fault opens up and more fluids pass through it, it actually dissolves the center of this mushroom-looking structure and redeposits those materials further out. And as a result, you end up with a zone structure. So again, when drilling these deposits, you end up with a stringer zone, which is the root of the mushroom shape, which is generally gold associated, whereas the cap is generally copper, lead, a lot of pyrite in there. You've got some zinc in there as well, and so it creates these quite interesting zones. And again, something that so of course Chesterfield also drilling at the moment. They're targeting around the Evlemeni pit, and we know that when you look at the historic information of this area, the Evlemeni pit was mined down to the stringer zone where the gold is, and all of that rich cap is now offset by a northeast southwest fault, which has pushed the materials down and undercover to where the guys are drilling at the moment. And so there's a good chance that that they're going to be drilling straight into what would be the cap. And they did in previous announcements say that they had hit sulfide material. Now, like I said, these VMSs can actually be dissolved and remobilized as they evolve. Well, the same thing can happen if the fluids move in a different direction. And one thing we know in Cyprus, and we certainly found whilst I was out there, a huge difficulty was when you did IP surveys. Now, this is detecting for induced polarization and resistivity. You're looking for your sulfides, and as a result, we found them everywhere because there's pyrite everywhere. And these same systems that form the gold and copper actually spew pyrite everywhere. So it does rely on a lot more geological kind of reading the ground, a bit of guessing, and a lot of drilling to try and find these things. So that's an example there as well.
Okay, and is there such thing as like a holy grail of the deposits? I mean, like, I suppose the holy grail would be high grade and high volume. Does that exist, or is that not the case?
Well, high grade and high volume certainly, but so let's take some of the massive ones over in Canada, the Red Lakes. Now, actually, a really good one, which I have been looking at, is pure gold. And now they have got an orogenic system, which again, of course, probably the largest. They've got a bit of an issue. So we know that they're high grade. We know that it's large, but because of what's called the Nugget Effect, they know that they are undervaluing their resource. So this might sound strange, but when you're drilling, you're taking a random selection of rocks within the vein. Let's take it. Let's just keep it simple and say we have one single vein. Now, though that vein may contain, for the sake of arguments, 1 million ounces, it doesn't mean that those 1 million ounces are spread across that area evenly. Now, the variation in how those ounces are spread is the Nugget Effect, basically. It's the change in difference within 0.0. And it's often actually associated with nuggets forming in the ore body. So what Goldstone have got is, as they're drilling, they have to do a top cut as well as a bottom cut to their resource. And because they haven't got sufficient intercepts into the high grade material, they are undervaluing the resource as it currently is, but cannot prove it isn't that until they start doing more bulk mining or more infill drilling. Okay. So it's an interesting concept, and it's something, again, people should be watching out for projects like Panther Metals and the Red Rock Australasian asset. Is even when drilling comes out, you're going to be looking for not just the gold, you're looking for structures in there as well, because though you've hit the gold vein, you may not actually have hit an accurate example of the gold. And you see people put out announcements of 2,000 grams a ton gold over 1 meter. Well, actually, you should be a little bit, it's not worried, but certainly think, okay, all the gold, because the deposit's not going to be 2,000 grams a ton gold, but it also means that those meters that were at either were barren or had very low gold grades, well, they're associated with that high grade gold. So it's something to, again, note is, what actually am I looking for? And Nugget Effect is certainly something that distorts drill results and needs just a little bit more looking over to really understand what you're looking at. And if someone tells you it's an orogenic deposit and they've hit 2,000 grams a ton gold, you can now say, okay, well, maybe we're looking at a 5 gram a ton mining operation here.
Right, because one core may be really rich and the next one may have nothing in.
Precisely. Yeah. And they might be right next to each other.
I think that's obviously what ECR encountered at Creswick as well, and that's not too far from the sort of Pow and Red Rock footprint, because they ended up doing the whole of bag testing just to try and get a more accurate result with their drilling. So yeah, there's definitely a Nugget Effect in that area, as you said, Charlie.
Well, yeah, I was actually going to bring on ECRs in particular because I don't think they necessarily got the credit that's due for them with regards to that, because the study that they did really did prove that the Nugget Effect wasn't as bad as you could possibly initially think when these drill results come out. And that's really good for them, because now you can see, now when you look at ECR's drill results, you can actually give it a little bit more weighting and kind of go, actually, this is a bit more exciting because I know the grade is going to be there. I don't need to dilute what these incepts are down, I can actually take these a little bit more of an exciting. Ooh, I've got 5 gram per ton incept over 10 meters. That's exciting. Not that I know what. Well, I'm not in saying that's what ECR have got or whatever. I'm just coming up with a random number there.
And the whole of bag testing that ECR did, and is that taking all of the samples that have come out and almost treating it as one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. So what they're finding there is the difference in assay within within 0.0. So at the point of sample taking. So often you'll see core being split down the middle. And if you imagine you have a nugget there, well, one side of the core might have the nugget and the other core doesn't have the nugget. So by taking the whole core, breaking it down, that can be solved. Another way of getting around this is actually using RC. So as long as it's relatively shallow, RC drill holes are quite a bit wider than diamond drilling. So though you're not getting the same geological information that you would have with diamond drill, you're actually getting a larger hole there. And sorry.
No, yeah, I'm just agreeing with you. Yeah, I think I understand. So yeah, what the diamond core is very good for showing the geology and getting nice cores to look at. But your RC drilling, it already comes up crushed, doesn't it? So you've got like your sample there, but you don't get an idea of the geology. It's more what's actually been found. Is that right?
It's more geochemically, statistically reliable or irrelevant, I guess. Representative. Okay. That would be the word. But you still need to kind of do them hand in hand, really, because certainly with an orogenic system, you need to understand the structures and you need to know what way the system is moving, as it were. And let's take actually a good example of someone doing both of these. Was going back to Cobra Resources. Now that asset. Sorry, you have to prompt me on the name of the
Medina.
Medina, thank you. That they're only into that one has been previously drilled, but it was only drilled to shallow depth, I think about 25 meters, and so it's a north-south fault. And so, of course, the guys came along and went, well, okay, if it's north-south, then we shall drill east-west, and we'll do a load of transects across there. And that's just what they did. And as they went across, some holes they got fantastic intercepts, but the majority of them came up barren. And this, of course, kind of confused the guys, and they just left it, assuming, okay, there is gold there, but it's just not of economic interest. Well, what Craig and the guys have realized is actually you might have an echelon faulting going on in there. Now, these are S-like shapes, and if you imagine from a north-south direction drawing S's, well, if you're going east-west, only once in a while are you ever going to intercept those S's or have a good statistical chance of hitting them. So what the guys have done is they swung the rigs round 45 degrees and they're drilling perpendicular to the main system, a bit deeper as well, to prove actually there is gold here, but you just have to look at it in a slightly different way. And that's an important thing to have as a technical team who don't just go off there and just do something for this drill for the sake of drilling. These guys have really thought about it. And this what initially brought my attention to the Cobra guys was the amount of geochemistry, multi-element geochemistry that they were doing and analyzing. And you could see that they were really trying to take on this task and develop a project properly. Like they're going to take this and they're going to end up with a real discovery here.
I think they called it fingerprint analysis. I think that was a terminology.
Fingerprinting, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So looking for fingerprint. So you may not find gold in a deposit, but you will be finding a multitude of elements that, due to the system, will be concentrated at the surface. And in the case of Cobra again, in calcretes and the like, that can be analyzed in different ways, it suddenly tells you, okay, well, if I'm seeing XYZ mineralization here, or even different ratios, that's an exciting one. It's when people look at ratios of different elements to indicate that the mineralization could be down below you. That's another exciting way of doing it. And actually, if anyone is interested, there's a gentleman, Benedict Steiner, who's put up a number of YouTube videos on that. If you want to get really nerdy, and he focuses predominantly up in Finland and areas where there's huge amounts of till, so glacial till that have covered these ore deposits, and identifying how to basically how to explore in these regions.
What's it called? Benjamin?
Benjamin Steiner.
Okay.
Steiner. Yeah.
I'll have a look.
I'm sure I can give links to this. There's a couple of other YouTube videos in particular. Ore Deposits 101. I know I've preached before.
Spot guys, yeah.
Certainly think that one's worth a watch. And actually, there's another gentleman who made some videos that I found, and I think they're really quite relevant, even though they're old and they talk like it's one of these school programs. But Mick, the mercenary geologist, Mickey Philp, he's created a number of exciting. Not exciting. They're great videos on how much. One of them was how much is gold worth in the ground, and it's him and another gentleman talking about how to actually value ounces in the ground and what you need to take into account here. And it's all very basic stuff, but I think it's something that I look at a number of projects around the place, and you wonder how on earth are these things going to get into production? They're either nowhere near infrastructure, the grade's not high enough, or the likes. And he does pull apart some of these RNSs a bit more fully in his videos, and it's well worth, again, if you want to take that next step in analysis.
Okay. Mercenary geologist, Mickey Flup, mercenary geologist. There's different episodes, isn't there? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I think he does a very good weekly roundup as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've seen him as well, but
okay.
All right, Charlie. I think you're just about coming to the end of your what you were looking to talk about.
Certainly was.
Yeah, you've actually given me quite a few ideas for future podcasts. So I was thinking, we've talked about nuggets. I don't think we talked about fine gold, but we could certainly talk about how these, the nugget systems and the fine gold systems, how they're processed and how they're put, the plant to recover the gold, basically. So I think that would be a good idea for a podcast. So we could maybe take, 3 or 4 deposits around the world, and we can maybe talk through the processing to get the bar at the end of it. I think that'd be quite interesting.
I think it would be interesting. I even thought, how do you start? How do you start looking for something? That'd be quite an interesting thing.
But there's loads you can talk about. You can go through all the different types of drilling, what it's used for, what's the benefits, the cost, how deep they can go. It really is an endless topic. So, I think you've opened a can of worms here, Charlie. I think we're going to.
Oh, good.
But listen, every day. I mean, I've been around a while, but I'm still, every day's a school day for me. I'm completely ignorant with a lot of these terms as well. So, I'm all up for finding out a bit more about these things. So, I've got a question for the two of you, right? Just before we finish the podcast, and it just popped up in my Twitter feed there while we were talking away. I'll ask you first, Charlie. If I could give you £100,000 of gold or £100,000 of silver tomorrow, what would you take and why?
Sorry, would I take £100,000 worth of gold or silver?
Yeah, what would you take? If I could drive down to wherever it is you stay in my big, I would need about £100,000 of silver. It would be a lot of silver, but you know what I mean. If I could turn up at your door with an Amazon delivery of £100,000 worth of silver,
I would take silver.
Okay.
So
why?
Reason being, discoveries are down on silver. The market's a lot thinner. Silver's used in not just as a store of wealth, but actually as a key component in solar panels.
Yep.
And currently, what's the gold-silver ratio? I think it's
80.
It's around 80. Yeah. And I'm thinking that's got to correct somewhat. Though I don't think the original 1 to 15 ratio is ever going to exist. I think it's going to come back better than 80.
Yeah, I think it was down as low as 17 because I was looking at this earlier on. It was down as low as 17 to 1 in 1980. And then I think just before the millennium, it was at 40 to 1. And then just before the crash, it was at 2008-9, it was round about 40 to 1 again. So it seems to be bouncing off that every 7 or 8 years. So, yeah, all right, that was interesting. I wasn't sure what you would say. I mean, obviously, I'm pretty biased because I love my silver, and I've got a wee collection going, as you've probably seen with some of my Twitter tweets, etc. Mark, what about you? £100,000 of gold or £100,000 of silver? Now, it'd be a bit, the shipping would be a bit more for you, Mark, because you're in Holland, so I'd need to get across the ferry.
Well, you might need the whole ferry, yeah. Yeah, I'd say with Charlie, I'm going to go silver. It's like the sort of perhaps unloved, cheaper brother of gold, but I think silver's very, very nice to look at, and as you say, it's used in a lot of things, from mobile phones to solar panels, and the silver paper market is insane, and the ratio is nuts, like you say, and I think it's just this kind of sort of unloved and undervalued. Cheaper brother. So yeah, I'd take the silver. Yeah,
I mean, obviously, I've said the silver as well, but the silver price is very volatile as well. I'm not saying gold is not volatile, but I think that
makes it more interesting. I think.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, that's quite interesting. I think we'll ask that question, Mark, to a few if we get any.
Okay.
Geologists on, we'll ask that question as well, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of just saying, "I'll just give me the gold," because people just like gold. And but no, it's interesting. I didn't think.
Well, it certainly broke my heart not to say gold. I must say.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. I imagine if you went with your heart, most people would say gold, but if you go with your head, I think probably silver's the smarter move at this moment in time.
Definitely.
Yeah, but like I say, in 15 years, it could be completely different. I mean, there was one I was looking at as well, just to finish off, and it was the gold to platinum ratio, and it's just insane. Platinum used to be worth, going back only 10 years, and I think platinum was worth more than gold. And now gold's double platinum. And that's just in 10 years. That's a huge swing. I might actually tweet that out. It just looks insane. And just looking through some of these gold to palladium and silver to gold ratios, it's really interesting, the swings, and it's very hard to predict. But if you could predict and be on the right side of these swings, there's a incredible amount of money to be made. But no, I just thought I would finish with a wee question, just something different. And I think we're all good. I think you've covered a lot tonight. Charlie, I'll probably need to listen to the podcast a couple of times. And I think when we put it out, Mark, we might try and, with your help, Charlie, we might try and get a couple of slides or a couple of pictures that may help explain some of your words, because we can actually turn this audio into a video. Is that right, Mark? And we can put up some slides.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we might.
Superb. Yeah, no, yeah. I'll send over some very basic schematics.
Yeah, and you might need to tell us what time slot to put them in as well, because people will be like, where do we put these? But no, it's been great having you on, and it's been far too long since the last one. But it just seems during COVID that the weeks and days just absolutely fly by. It's I can't believe it's Christmas in what, I don't know, 10 weeks, less than 10 weeks or something stupid like that.
Oh yeah,
it's just mad. I'm quite glad all my kids are getting grown up now, and it's not as hectic as it used to be. It's a bit more. It's still hectic, but it's not manic, shall we say? You've got all that to look forward to, Mark, haven't you? You as well, Charlie?
Apparently.
Apparently.
No.
You don't know? Oh, well. Yeah. Anyway. Well,
Right.
that's it. Well, I think we'll call it quits. That's about an hour, which is a good time.
It's good. It's excellent. Yep. Thank you very much, Charlie, for sharing your knowledge there this evening with us.
Well, that's okay. Rambled a bit, but
It's fine.
Good.
This is the whole idea of these podcasts, Charlie. They're not meant to be, BBC productions. It's just three guys having a chat, and we see how it pans out. And for the guys that are listening, when there was absolutely no, we had a chat for like 2 or 3 minutes beforehand, and we just went straight into it. So I think you've done an amazing job, Charlie, to be able to talk for that long without any beer. Usually, I would need to have a lot of beer to talk that long, but I think you deserve one. I think you should go and get one now, or a glass of wine.
I think that is my plan for this evening.
Good, good stuff. All right,
Thanks.
Great.
Thanks
a lot, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. Cheers.
Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to another podcast from Market Musings with Fairbairn and Russell.